For our first Copic Monkey tutorial, we're going to work on why some colors don't blend as well as you'd like them to within their natural blending family. And there's a reason for that. Normally, the natural blending family is a really good rule of thumb to go by. However, sometimes it just doesn't work. And what we're going to show today is why RV11 doesn't shade as well with RV13 and 14 as you'd like. So we're going to look first here at the chart. Here's RV11, and you'll notice that RV13 and RV14 are just really bright, and when you try to shade with those two colors, with RV11 being your main color, it just doesn't work out like you want it to. And the reason is because using that first number, as you might remember, scoot over here real quick, when you're looking at that first middle number right there, that is your intermediate classification, which means how much gray is added to the marker. So it's your saturation point. So think of it kind of as percents. So 10% means 10% of gray is added. 20 or 2 is a 20% gray. That's not actual real math of the percentages, but it's an easy way to remember that as you get further down, or up, I guess, you have more gray added to the marker, like your 90s, your 80s, of course, are going to have a lot more gray. So think of it as 80% gray, 90% gray, even though that isn't really a full percentage. There isn't really 90% of gray added to that marker. But it gives you a good idea of what we're working with here. So when we're looking at the RV11 category, that means there's only 10% of gray added to those markers. So if you think about it that way, then you'll realize that these, since they don't have a lot of gray, they just don't look natural. Natural shadows that you see in the world, in real life pictures, have gray in them. So when you're using a bright color to shade with, it just doesn't look right. So we're going to go ahead and jump on down and use that RV11 there and shade it here with whoops, that's not quite high enough, RV34, because there is more gray in that marker and it will look more natural. So I have a sample here. This is Ariana, and she's from Paper Makeup Stamps, and you will get a couple of images of her in a little kit that will be mailed out to you. So let's see here. Zoom on in again. We're going to do our first layer of color, and I'm just going to kind of do this quickly so that way you get a basic idea of what we're working with here. And I'm just going over all the ruffles and everything because it doesn't really matter. I'm just showing you as an example. So we put some color down, and now if you use we'll grab 14. So here's your, whoa, way too close, 14 color. You get the idea. You don't really need to see the end of the marker. And we do some shading in there. It's just really bright. And even if you go back over it then with your RV11, it still just doesn't look natural. So using our RV34, you are going to get a much more natural look to your shading than you would with the 14 because of that gray matter. Gray matter, I sound like I'm on Fringe. I love that TV show though. So that's basically what we are working with to practice. So I want you to take RV11 and RV34 to practice with. Now, two of the other color families that I think of this same principle with is, let's see if I can find it on my chart for you, using BG10. And again, if you shade BG10 with its natural ones, which is 13, 15, now on my little chart it doesn't look so bad, but if you really had the markers out in front of you, you would notice that 13 and 15 are very bright. So I always jump down here to BG72 to shade my BG10, and it just gives you a much more natural look. So I'm just going to kind of show you here on her wing, just to use the same sample and make things nice and quick for this tutorial, because I'm sure my camera is going to time out at some point. and I'm at 5 minutes now. Using the BG72 to shade a little bit, and then going back on top of it again, of course, with your BG10 to kind of shade things out, you're going to get a much more natural look because there is so much gray added to BG72. And you're just going to get a much more natural effect. So that's that. And I'm going to upload a separate video for the technique of coloring we use, so this video won't get too long. Be back in a minute.